Dear learners and viewers, I'm so very glad to be able to connect to you for yet another discussion on very important topic of the day, that is William Shakespeare's Hamlet. In this paper, which is a part of MEG 2, in which we study British drama, it is very important that we look at how British drama has evolved all the years. In this paper, you find that we have put together so many important texts, right from like we have University Wits, we have Shakespeare, we have G.B. Shaw, we have T.S. Eliot, and a whole range to make you understand the different dimensions and how literature and drama in particular has captured the essence of the evolution as it has happened in this society. So today we will be looking at the literary creative genius of William Shakespeare, and we'll discuss Hamlet, which is one of the most important plays of, in that sense, every play by Shakespeare, every poem by Shakespeare, engages us and reveals us, the mysteries of life and gives us a way forward. But this has a bit more. And as students of masters, you know that when we read stories, we just don't read stories. We approach them as there are layers and layers of meaning hidden there. So we actually approach stories, narratives, with a view to kind of be a little skeptical about that. So we study stories to understand the storiness of the stories. So this is very important, that when we approach a narrative, we look at how the drama has unfolded. And you know that when we discuss drama, it is important to know that a drama is not there to read. It is for the purpose of enactment on a stage. So when you are reading, I have been suggesting all our students that we have to approach the primary text first before reading the summary and the overview and every other part. So when we are approaching this is important that we, sometimes we can do a group activity and we can group ourselves and, start reading. And then sometimes we understand more dimension of what the dramatist is trying to communicate. So this is what, let me start with you how we'll discuss this. In this session, we'll discuss how, Elizabethan age, started up with the dramatic activities, and how do we understand Hamlet there. We'll discuss the text of the play, how, various tools of scholarships for the purpose of understanding of this. So this is how we'll gradually develop an argument, textual criticism, and we will have a special focus on soliloquies. You see, this play has plenty of discussions like not between two characters, but when the protagonist, Hamlet, for example, the kind of spontaneous overflow that he is experiencing in his mind and heart, he shares that with the audience. So I think Shakespeare in this play has used this tool, this technique to perfection. And like on 7 occasions, there are soliloquies, and we are able to see such a dynamic use of that. We'll discuss that in greater detail in the due course, and we'll also see how Hamlet can be looked at, an extension of miracle, morality, and mystery plays. We'll also try to look at how background information is relevant to the study of a text, and we'll see how we can approach this play for a comprehensive understanding. If we look at, when Shakespeare was writing, Queen Elizabeth was at the helm of affairs, and we find that the dramatic kind of production, rose to all-time high. We discussed in our last class that how University Wits came forward, Christopher Marlowe, Lyly, Kidd, Nash, and other people. And now with the arrival of William Shakespeare at Lord Chamberlain's Men, you find a big event happening there. And in this play, we find that Hamlet, for example, the tragedy, the character of Hamlet has inspired even more varied, complex, and intense reaction among its audience as well as critics and scholars. We find that, if you look at how, all different ideological theories, critical frameworks, and literary criticism that we employ, this play has been looked at from the feministic point of view, this play has been looked at from Marxist point of view, and the language has been looked at from a diverse perspective. So this is how this it is, you need to understand that, in the Elizabethan drama, there was a clash between predestination and free will. Here you can look at how kind of impact of Renaissance drama, Renaissance impulse at that time comes in, and how in comparison to plays that we see in earlier times, where the predestination part is so dominant that sometimes characters look very weak, kind of puppets in the hands of destiny. But here in the hands of Shakespeare, we find that there is such a dynamic play by the free will also, and we find that how the idea of theology, geography, and science comes in, and writing skills, but also because of the art of borrowing, combining. You see what this can be discussed in greater detail here. Like Shakespeare is good at writing, but what he is doing simultaneously, he is giving us a very important demonstration of how you can kind of take storylines, plots from the past, borrowing, combining, and recreating something new with even more enhanced, added impact. So this is very important in this. And it is when we are discussing Hamlet, I think we can talk briefly about the idea of Shakespearean hero, how it is different from the dramatists who have characterized their characters. So here hero must be a person of some stature or high position, such as a king, general, or a nobleman. Hero must be a good person. He must matter to us. He must see him, this is important, that he has to create a sense of aura. He has to connect with the audience with a sense of awe, and he has to create respect and reverence. And the audience must see the hero as a worthwhile person to be able to create the required dramatic impact. And because of his positions, his actions usually have far-reaching impact for everyone. It is not that when hero says something, it is in his own individual capacity or for implications which are nearby his personal life. But no, here when Shakespeare creates a hero, his ideas, his expressions, his speech has larger ramifications. There are philosophical overdose that we experience here. And also we find that hero must possess a character trait or quality which under normal circumstances would be a virtue, but under the special circumstances of the play proves to be fatal flaw, what we normally call as hamartia or tragic flaw that leads to his downfall. Here it is important for me to share with you that in relation to Greek idea of a hero, here, Greek understanding is that hero has to be a complete man, perfect man, just like, we have in Homer, and we have in Sophocles and other Aristophanes. Here in times of Shakespeare and other people in the Elizabethan age, we find that hero is somewhat much more fallible. He is little more mundane. He is much like ordinary people also. Oh, his heroic nature does not come down in that sense. But here he is we find that sometimes, if we look at other characters, Shakespeare and Othello, Macbeth, and other ones, we find that they are much more human. So this is what, I mean, you can understand that how when Shakespeare characterizes or when creates heroes, his idea is that at the, the hero should create awe. He should look like inspirational, motivational person where everyone is able to relate to him. He is also invested, he or she is invested with some ordinary traits so that people at large are able to relate to him. So if we extend this point, we find that, he here means hero. Hero usually makes further errors in judgment following his misdeed. Like, for example, if I discuss Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, hero in his understanding has no wrong. He does not suffer on any account because of his personal understanding, personal weaknesses. But here, you will find that errors in judgment take place with a Shakespearean hero. Often he has a distorted perception or is blind to realities. You will see in Hamlet how he is down with indecision. He is trying to generate more and more evidence, proof of his father's assassination. So he suffers both outwardly, isolation, alienation, attacks, and inwardly. So there is a sense of paradox, a sense of ambivalence going on in the character's mind, in the hero's mind. Hero must elicit both pity and fear from the audience. This is again a build-up on the one very important dramatic component of tragedy, where there has to be catharsis. The arousal of pity and fear is very important. Usually we see that the hero is able to recognize, identified with the mistake towards the end, and of course he must die. The death is huge learning influence in this. If you look at how Hamlet evolves, very brief information, there are references in the past where we have, like in 12th century, we have just a Denouement from volume 5 of Histories Tragiques, and we have Thomas Kyd also, in your Hamlet, there is a reference, and there is a kind of continued sense of characterization like that. And if you look at the sources, Thomas Nash makes an indirect reference to it in his epistle to the gentlemen students of both universities, and Timothy Bright's treatise of melancholy in 1586. Shakespeare, it would appear, did much to distance himself from his original source and make his play essentially distinct. So there are historical references of the character of the text, but when you read Shakespeare's Hamlet, you find that Shakespeare, with his own dynamic critical investment, this character looks just like Shakespearean. This character looks like a new one. So in the unique aspects, we find tragic flaw, supernatural element, internal and external conflict, fate, the role of fate and fortune, the theme of foul and revenge, paradoxes of life, and catharsis. So we find that Shakespeare has handled all the ideas, aspects of a tragedy to great perfection, and we find that the impact is something that stays with us for a long time. In the tragic structure, we find there is exposition, rising action, falling action, and resolution. Like if I may give you briefly what the storyline holds, the Hamlet, who is Prince of Denmark, is visited by a mysterious ghost resembling his recently deceased father, the king. The ghost tells Hamlet that his father was murdered by Claudius, the king's brother, who then took the throne and married Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. The ghost encourages Hamlet to avenge his father's death by killing Claudius. This is how the play begins to unfold. In the Act 1, Scene 1, you find that other people also notice the movement of the ghost. Horatio also acknowledges it, and then Hamlet sees that in his dream, and then this whole sense of tragic conflict begins to take place. Hamlet questions whether the scepter is to be believed. Hamlet's uncertainty, anguish, and grief are what makes the character so believable. He is arguably one of literature's most psychologically complex characters. What you find, like I discussed this briefly in the beginning also, that there is such psychological kind of turmoil and turbulence in this play, which makes it so very unique. Earlier, the conflict was largely external, but here, the kind of conflict and discussion and kind of churning that takes place inside the mind of Hamlet is phenomenal. He's slow to take action, what people call indecision, but what he does is rash and violent. We can see this in the famous curtain scene when Hamlet kills Polonius. He's very, sometimes his knee-jerk reactions create issues. Sometimes he's very laid back, very slow, and very, too much on the thinking side. But then, in the curtain scene where he is discussing the events with his mother about how, his sense of anger of her decision to marry the uncle Claudius, and then immediately he, instantly and out of a sudden rush of blood, he kills Polonius. So this is how, Polonius's daughter Ophelia is in love with Hamlet, but the relationship has broken down since Hamlet learned of his father's death. He is under tremendous turmoil. Ophelia is instructed by Polonius and Laertes to spurn Hamlet's advances. Ultimately, Ophelia commits suicide as a result of Hamlet's confusing behavior towards her and death of the father. This is another kind of complication that develops. And you find that there's an issue of play within a play. To verify the ghost idea, Hamlet decides to organize a play to reenact his father's murder at the hands of the Claudius in order to gauge Claudius's reaction. He confronts his mother about his father's murder and hears something behind to notice how will it unfold, what will be his reaction. Believing it to be Claudius, Hamlet stabs the man with his sword. It transpires that he has accidentally killed Polonius. Claudius realizes that Hamlet is out to get him and professes that Hamlet is mad. Claudius arranges for Hamlet to be shipped to England with his former friend, and who have been informing the king about Hamlet's state of mind. They were appointed with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. These characters were appointed to kind of, in a way, spy on the Prince Hamlet. Claudius has secretly sent orders for Hamlet to be killed on arrival in England, but Hamlet escapes from his ship and swaps his death order for a letter ordering the death of other two people. And Hamlet arrives back in Denmark just as Ophelia is being buried, which prompts him to contemplate life, death, and the frailty of human condition. Very important. And this is, and adds to the character, the psychological intensity of a dramatic, tragic hero. The performance of his soliloquy is a big part of how any actor portrays Hamlet and is judged by critics. Then, find Ophelia's brother Laertes returns to from France to revenge his death of Polonius, and he plots with him. Claudius plots with him to make Hamlet's death appear accidental and encourages him to anoint his sword with poison. He also puts a cup of poison aside in case the sword is unsuccessful, which was to be served to Hamlet once he is victorious. So, just to take the overview forward, in the action, swords are swapped, and Laertes is mortally wounded with the poisoned sword after striking Hamlet with it. He forgives Hamlet before he dies, and then we find mother also dies because she, she accidentally had consumed the cup of poison. Hamlet stabs Claudius and forces him to drink the rest of the poison drink. Hamlet's revenge is finally complete. In his dying moments, he bequeaths the throne to Fortinbras and prevents Horatius' suicide by imploring him to stay alive to tell the tale. This is how we at the level of storyline and summary of it. And just like I told you that we'll look at how soliloquies form a very important dimension here, and we can understand the psychological inner turmoil that the character experiences, Hamlet experiences through these. So we find that 2 of the 7 soliloquies occur in Act 1, Scene 1, lines 129 to 159, and then Scene 5, lines 92. You have to kind of read these expressions time and again, to be able to kind of step into Hamlet's shoes to understand the condition that he's passing through. And then there are other soliloquies in Act 3, and you find that there are other, in Act 5 also, and Act 5, Scene 3, Act 4 also you find a soliloquy. So if I may discuss how first soliloquy appears, where ghost has appeared and suggestions of a possible treacherous murder take place. His mother's conduct pains him the most, so loving to my mother that he might not, between the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Why she would hang on him. This is something that reveals Hamlet's mind, that he's very angry once the news of his father's death is declared, and he's kind of all the time complaining that why what was the hurry, what was what made her what made his mother so hurried in her response to marry the uncle. So this is important. Like in the first soliloquy, his anger, his sense of frustration, and a sense of disappointedness also with the mother. In next soliloquy, we find that Hamlet is committing himself to avenge the father's death. This soliloquy deepens his disgust with his mother's conduct, and the fact that he is mother's flesh and blood receives a reminder. In the third soliloquy, we find him remorseful for not having taken any action to avenge his father's death. There is yet another implied and understated reference to his mother in the lines in which he describes Claudius as a bloody body villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, and kindless villain. So this is how different soliloquies occurring at different places kind of lead to complication, lead to further development of the action is important. How Claudius's kind of treacherous plans are revealed. For example, if you look at the fourth soliloquy, which is the most important reference point as far as the entire English literature's history is concerned, to be or not to be, is the most philosophical statement. I mean, in the context of the play, and critics have understood it in the larger context of the life also, where Hamlet makes in the play, and he has provoked much debate, and it is perhaps the most discussed and interpreted. One of the most major concerns that Hamlet's rumination focus in this soliloquy is the conflict between passion and reason. Some people, critics also look at it as to whether this is between a choice between life and death, between kind of like we find that how literature negotiates with life, and here everywhere you find that this to be, to do or not to do, to what road to take and what road not to take. So this is very important sense, and here Hamlet is portrayed as someone possessed of the passion of melancholy. We find that if we look at the Hamlet's persona closely, we find that he he's a man of melancholy, where he likes, to be alone, where he, if I may read, this phrase, how I weary, stale, flat, unprofitable seems to me all the uses of the world. So this spirit of melancholy, this sense of a tranquil mind, this is very, visibly the trait of the character, the hero, Hamlet. In Soliloquy 5, we find that there is, further exploration, further exposition of what Hamlet is passing through. I hope you have understood that soliloquy is fundamentally a kind of revelation of a character's deeper mind, what he is not able to discuss with his fellow characters. Like it's much more than a kind of monologue. He is basically establishing a connection with the audience to take them along as to what transpires in his deeper mind and what kind of conflicts that he is experiencing. So in this, he says, it is now the very witching time of night, and now I could drink hot blood and do such bitter business of the day, would quake to look on. So again, how the trauma, the disturbance, the anxiety, frustration, and a sense of no way forward that he experiences. So these are longer. I'm just like trying to quote specific lines, but you have to read all these soliloquies in detail to be able to form an understanding of it. And the sixth soliloquy occurs in the prayer scene. Contains one of the most one more reference to his mother. My mother stays, as does the last soliloquy, my mother staying. So again, you find that Hamlet is kind of always thinking about his mother's conduct. What was the kind of hurry element in her, and he's little suspicious also sometimes, like whether his mother kind of joined Claudius in his father's murder. So this is how, like in the sixth soliloquy, you also find that. And in the final soliloquy, which happens at the end of the scene 4, Act 4, and takes place when Hamlet has encountered Fortinbras' army and talked with Fortinbras himself, Hamlet reveals to his audience that he feels that if a man has no purpose, he is no better than a beast. So he must use his encounter with Fortinbras to spur his revenge. When this idea of revenge comes in, there is a, this is we have discussed in our previous discussions that the Senecan influence, where there is a lot of element of revenge element. The character, kind of take all his energies to seek revenge of some wrong, some unjust which has been done to them. So what we understand of the soliloquy is a mental makeup of the character, as well as the delay embedded in the plot structure of the play. We find that there is a sense of self-reflection, and which is excessively speculative, indecisive, and irresolute on the part of Hamlet, our major character. Tragic flaw that turns Hamlet into a tragedy and Hamlet as a prime agent. We also find that an obsessive concern with his mother's incestuous conduct is also revealed. And if we look at the purpose of soliloquy, we find that Shakespeare uses soliloquies to perfection and asides also simultaneously, so that the audience may hear what the characters are thinking, what this major character is thinking, while the other characters are stay. Sometimes, as a dramatist, it's not possible to kind of reveal everything during the course of discussion between two characters. So this dramatic employment is very, very impactful. In Shakespeare Hamlet, the hero reveals his inner conflicts, introspective attitude in each of the lengthy soliloquies in the play. We have seen many soliloquies in the past also. You'll find how T.S. Eliot uses soliloquies in his play Murder in the Cathedral and other ones. We find Dr. Faustus's soliloquies, where there is a sense of lamentation. But I think in Hamlet's soliloquies, the use and kind of the physical condition that, the tragic conflict that he's passing through is revealed even much more. If we talk about how Aristotle, in the sense, in the canonical sense of definition of tragedy, the imitation of action that is serious and also having magnitude, complete in itself, in language and with pleasurable accessories, each kind brought in separately in parts of the work, in a dramatic, not in a narrative form, with the incidents arousing pity and fear, wherewith to accomplish its catharsis of such emotion. This is how Aristotle's idea come forth, how, what has to be the actor, what has to be the unfolding of action. I think if we look at this play, Hamlet's kind of evolution and culmination, and then subsequently his death, we find that Hamlet rises above the average revenge play and answers to the subtler demands of a great tragedy. What Aristotle and the Greek masters wanted of a tragedy. So here, elsewhere you find that people have done revenge plays and tragedies, but here Hamlet with his sense of inner turmoil and kind of anxiety, it is with this, I think, subtler demands of a great tragedy are fulfilled. In the end, Hamlet turns out to be a great tragedy rather than a mere tragic play. If I talk a little more about the tragic conflict, we find that there are occasion, you can read it as how kind of, there's a religiosity, a religious influence, and you can say Christianity also figures in this play, like when he's discussing issues in one of his soliloquies, thoughts of afterlife. If I may read it for you, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter, deals with theological questions of sin, damnation, and salvation. So again, like we have in miracle, mystery, morality plays, there is a kind of constant exploration of the themes of damnation and salvation and sinfulness. Here also we find that in his revelations, particularly in soliloquies, we find that there is a good sense of treatment of this, and he kind of explores the idea of afterlife, to die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There is the rub, for in that sleep of death, what dreams may come, when we have shuffled of this mortal coil, must give a pause. This undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles this will, and makes us rather bear those ills that we have, than fly to others we know not of. Again, this is the idea of fear, anxiety, sense of confusion, ambiguity, kind of a kind of hazy overview of life. Whether why do we live? Why do we spend so much time on certain activities, and kind of what is the idea of will? Is it that we live to kind of play the predestined role and responsibility, or is it is something that is completely unique and what we can do out of our free will? I think in relation to all these plays that we find, all these soliloquies and the kind of moral kind of ideas explored there, we can look at how this is kind of revealed by Shakespeare as to how a character can go beyond a tragic play, how kind of mental tension, mental anxiety and confusion, ambiguity can be brought out on stage, and how kind of audience can be made to empathize, and how audience can be made to relate with the issues, with the dimensions which are sometimes not visible. I think it is in linkage to kind of more understanding of this play, we can look at how the primary focus of the play's thematic burden lies on interpreting Hamlet as a revenge play. In order to enhance our understanding, we can how this play can be studied as a revenge play and little more than that. How this looks like a kind of a narrative by Senecan, inspired by Senecan influence, and how it goes much beyond. And we can also comment on the nature and significance of ethics of revenge in Hamlet, for example, like what is the role of ethic of revenge, and how do various characters in this play respond to the issues of revenge. How like for example Ophelia, that how she responds, when she comes to understand how do they look at the same concept from a different point of view. And we can also look at how does the preponderance of the metaphors of theater, acting, stage, etc. in Hamlet's condition in our response to the play and interpretation. This is very significant to look at how a kind of dramatic unfolding has taken place. And it is also important that we look at does our own reading of the play suggest that one could profitably read and enjoy the play without paying attention to the issue of theme and meaning. This is again little important in the sense that do we become captives of the storyline as the dramatists want, or there is a scope beyond. So you can read a story from multiple dimensions and standpoints to realize what kind of the dramatic appeal that this. So we'll try to wind it up for today with this understanding that Shakespeare's Hamlet, which has been translated by many people, which is available to global audience. I mean, about 100 odd languages it is available, and people are beginning to relate to Hamlet's this dramatic personality. And subsequently we find that T.S. Eliot called it a dramatic failure, but again he the kind of inaction and kind of indecision that he demonstrates throughout the play. So but here what we can understand that the Shakespeare's character Hamlet in this play, the kind of situation the kind of different situations that he is a part of, I think it is much more complex. It is not perhaps good to call it a failure altogether, and we can look at how his complex sense of negotiation and the kind of intensity that we find in this play. So we'll wind it up, and I would want you to look at all these soliloquies and kind of interpret how and what deeply psychological issues have been kind of worked out by the dramatist, and how it has been located in the context of the play. Simultaneously, like if I may give you some of the readings, like the text that you may approach. I mean, there is kind of Norton's anthology on Shakespeare. You can read that, and in the commentaries you find that there is a very good explanation of all these aspects. Will connect to you once again on the other aspects, on like as far as the, I told you right in the beginning that there are enormous sense of critical perspectives that we can take as far as feminist perspective, where we have the mother and the beloved who are who are very important parts of the action, but then they commit suicides, or like they get killed in the course of the play. What is what is that all about? And the Marxist perspective and the deep psychological aspects we'll discuss. And we'll just call it a day. We'll just stop here with this understanding that we'll connect to each other in the next discussion about all other critical explanations. Thank you very much. We'll stop here. Thank you very much.